The alarms inside Imperial Command began with a soft beep, something so small that most officers ignored it. It was the kind of sound that came from dust on a sensor or a loose cable. But then the beep became a deep warning tone, and every screen in the room turned black at the same time. The entire command center went silent as officers stared at empty monitors that should never go dark. The chief of sensors tried to reboot the system, but the machine did not respond. It was as if something outside the station had forced the network to shut down. The Imperial commander, a tall man with sharp eyes, stepped forward and demanded a report. But no one could give an answer. The sensors had simply died without reason. 3 seconds passed. Then the screens lit up again. Everyone leaned closer, expecting a normal star map or some random asteroid. Instead, the main monitor showed a massive unknown object floating in Imperial space. No one understood how it got there. There had been no warp signature. No jump trace. No engine signal. One moment space was empty, and the next, this giant ship was standing right in front of them. The object was dark gray and shaped like a spearhead. Its armor looked old but strong, covered in burn marks and deep scars. The officers tried to zoom in, but the image shook as if the ship itself did not want to be seen. Every officer in the room felt something strange, a kind of instinct, a warning that the thing in front of them was not normal. The commander ordered the scanners to begin analyzing the ship. Numbers started appearing on the screen, and each new reading made the officers panic more. The ship's size was equal to a dreadnought. Its weapon energy readings were higher than anything the Empire had ever recorded. The armor density was off the chart. And worst of all, the ship was not responding to any communication signal. The command room filled with low whispers. Some officers asked if it belonged to a new enemy. Others wondered if it came from a hidden empire. But one old officer, a man who had studied ancient war records, felt a chill crawl down his spine. The hull design looked familiar. Too familiar. He demanded the scan team to zoom in on the front section of the ship. The commander allowed it, and slowly, the image became clearer. Dust and scratches covered the metal, but a line of faded letters came into view. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the old officer stepped back as if someone had pushed him. The letters on the hull read, Terran Battleship, TSS Vanguard. A shock ran through the entire command center. Someone dropped a datapad. Another officer whispered a curse. Everyone knew the stories. Every child in the Empire grew up hearing legends about Terrans. The humans who never surrendered. The warriors who fought until the end. The species that vanished after the Great Collapse centuries ago. Every book said humans were extinct, gone from the galaxy forever. But now a Terran warship was sitting in the heart of Imperial space. The commander tried to speak, but his voice shook. He ordered immediate communication attempts. No reply. He commanded the fleet to form a defensive wall around the unknown ship. They responded quickly. Dozens of Imperial vessels moved into position, aiming their weapons at the silent giant. But the Terran ship still did nothing. It did not activate shields. It did not move. It did not power weapons. It just floated there like a ghost, waiting. The atmosphere inside Imperial Command grew heavier every second. Officers checked their scanners again and again, hoping it was a mistake. But every result said the same thing: this was a Terran battleship. Real. Alive. And very dangerous. Fear spread across the room. Everyone knew what Terrans were capable of. Their war history was full of victories they should not have won. Their ships were famous for impossible feats. Their soldiers were said to fight even when outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. And now one of their strongest warships had appeared without warning. The commander tried to keep control, but even he felt fear. If this ship was active, it could destroy the entire blockade in minutes. If it was damaged or uncontrolled, it could still cause massive destruction. And if Terrans had returned, then the entire galaxy would change forever. A young officer monitoring power levels suddenly shouted. Everyone looked at her screen. The Terran ship's internal systems were slowly activating. Not weapons. Not engines. Something inside the ship was waking up. Something alive. The commander demanded the fleet to keep weapons ready. Officers held their breath. The old man whispered that Terrans never left anything half dead. If something was waking up inside that ship, it meant danger. It meant someone inside the Vanguard was alive. Then, unexpectedly, a small signal came from the Terran ship. A simple sound. A steady rhythm. A heartbeat. A human heartbeat. The room shook with fear. A human, alive for centuries. How? Why? What was the purpose of this sudden appearance? The Terran ship remained silent, but a cold message was now clear. The Terrans were not gone. They had returned. An Imperial Command had no idea what would happen next. The heartbeat kept echoing through the speakers, steady and calm, like the person inside the Terran ship was not afraid at all. Every Imperial officer felt their skin crawl. No human should be alive. No Terran ship should exist. And definitely no heartbeat should sound so calm while facing an entire Imperial fleet. The commander stared at the glowing rhythm on the screen. It felt wrong. It felt powerful. It felt confident. He ordered the communication officer to send a direct message again. The officer activated the channel and spoke clearly, trying to hide the fear in his voice. Unknown Terran vessel, identify yourself. State your purpose. You are surrounded. Only silence returned. Then the heartbeat signal grew louder, stronger, almost like the person inside wanted them to hear it. Wanted them to feel it. The commander clenched his jaw. This was psychological warfare. Terrans were famous for that. They did not attack first, they let the enemy shake, break, and fear the worst. The Imperial warships tightened their formation. Their engines hummed. Their weapons glowed. But the Terran battleship still did not move. The Empire had fought 100 species across the stars, but this silence was worse than any battle. A young sensor officer checked the readings again. Her hands shook slightly, but she kept working. Then she gasped. Commander, something inside the Terran ship is changing. Everyone turned. The internal power level of the Vanguard was rising again, slow and stable, like a giant waking from a long sleep. Light patterns moved through the hull like veins carrying fresh energy. The entire ship seemed to breathe. What systems are activating? The commander demanded. The officer swallowed hard. Everything, sir. Life support. Internal lights. Structural fields. Even the bridge. The Imperial Command room fell quiet. The bridge was the heart of any Terran ship. If it was coming back online, someone in that ship was preparing to take control. The old historian officer stepped forward again, fear in his eyes. Terran ships were built differently, they had strange systems. Some said their ships were linked to their captains. Some said they were alive. The commander snapped at him. Superstition. The old man's voice grew colder. Sir. Terran superstitions usually turned out to be true. Before the commander could respond, the main screen flickered. A new signal appeared. Not a message. Not a voice. An image. It showed a dim, broken hallway inside the Terran ship. Sparks fell from the ceiling. Smoke drifted through the air. The walls were cracked like the ship had been through a war that should have killed every soul on board. But the camera shifted slowly, and a shadow moved. Something, or someone, was walking inside that ship. The Imperial officers held their breath as the figure came into view. A human figure. Tall. Wearing damaged Terran armor. A helmet hung from one hand. The man's face was dirty, scarred, and tired, but his eyes were alive. Sharp. Focused. He looked directly into the camera. The entire Empire felt that stare. There was no fear in his eyes. No weakness. Only calm strength. Like he had seen hell and survived it. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady. If you can see this. I am awake. The message ended. The command room exploded with panic. Officers shouted, some stepping back, some reaching for alarm buttons. The commander raised his hand and forced silence. But even he felt his heart beating too fast. The sensor officer shouted again. Commander. The Terran ship is turning. The Vanguard rotated slowly, its massive frame moving with silent grace. It was not pointing weapons. It was not charging power. It was simply facing the Imperial flagship, like a predator looking straight into the eyes of its prey. Shouts filled the room. Orders flew across the fleet. Imperial ships raised shields, weapons locked, targeting systems activated. The whole formation trembled with fear. But the Terran battleship did not fire. It merely stared back. Then something impossible happened. Every Imperial weapon shut down again. Not damaged. Not destroyed. Just, turned off. Like the Terran ship had pressed a single invisible switch. The room filled with screams of disbelief. Our guns are offline. Shields collapsed. Engines frozen. We're dead, we're dead. The commander slammed his fist on the console. Silence. Regain control. But no one could. The Terran ship had disabled them with one invisible pulse. Then the Vanguard sent a second image. It showed stars. Endless stars. A map. A path. A path leading straight toward the Imperial capital. The commander stared at the map with cold fear. This wasn't random. This wasn't an accident. The Terran battleship had come with a purpose. A message. A warning. Or something far bigger. The heartbeat signal played again, slower now, almost calm, almost patient. As if the human inside the ship was waiting for something. And the Empire had no idea what that something was. The Empire had faced many enemies in the past, but nothing felt like this. The Terran battleship Vanguard floated in silence, still aimed directly at the Imperial flagship. Every disabled Imperial system flickered weakly, like the entire fleet was kneeling in front of an ancient ghost. Inside Imperial Command, panic grew like a slow fire. The commander leaned over the console, staring at the map the Terran ship had sent. A glowing path pointed toward the Imperial capital, straight into the heart of the Empire. The message was simple. It was dangerous. And it felt personal. Why would Terrans return now? One officer whispered. Why show us the capital? Another asked. The old historian officer stepped closer. His voice trembled. Terrans never acted without reason. If they plot a course, it is never a mistake. The commander turned to him sharply. And what reason do you believe this is? The old man swallowed. A warning, or a reminder. Before anyone could answer, the Terran ship's lights changed. A faint blue glow ran along the hull, smooth, controlled, like the ship was alive and stretching after centuries of sleep. The heartbeat signal slowed again. Calm. Too calm. The commander felt something was wrong. Sensors, report. The young sensor officer checked the readings, and her eyes widened. Sir, there is movement on board. The command room froze. She continued, her voice shaking. More systems are activating, medical units, cryo units, life support capsules. Cryo, the commander repeated. You mean more Terrans? She nodded slowly. Possibly. Multiple life signatures are appearing. Weak, but real. A heavy silence filled the room. One Terran had already put an entire Imperial fleet on its knees. What would happen if more woke up? Before fear could grow further, the screen lit again. A new video feed appeared from inside the Vanguard. This time the hallway was brighter, the lights humming as if remembering their old purpose. The human man, the Terran, walked through the corridor with steady steps. His breath was slow. His face was calm. He carried no weapon, yet he felt more dangerous than any soldier the Empire had ever trained. He stopped at a sealed door. The door hissed open with a deep metallic sound. Inside were transparent pods, dozens of them. Frost covered the glass. Shapes rested inside. The Terran touched the first pod gently, like greeting an old friend. Then he looked at the camera again. His voice echoed through the Imperial Command speakers, calm and cold. "You should not have found us this early." The room went dead silent. The Terran continued walking down the row of pods. "We were not ready. The galaxy was not ready. But now, you leave me no choice." The commander slammed the console. "What does that mean? Is this a threat? A warning?" But the Terran ignored him and opened a pod command screen. He placed his hand on the glass panel. Imperial sensors exploded with new readings. The pod status changed from stable to awakening. "Are those soldiers?" someone whispered. "No," the old historian answered quietly, eyes wide in fear. "Terran soldiers never used pods. These must be something else." Lights flashed across the pod room as energy surged. The Terran turned away from the camera, his voice distant. "Listen carefully, Empire. We are not your enemy. But you stand in the path of something greater than you know." The commander shouted into the comm, "Identify yourself. Identify your intention." The Terran paused, then finally replied. "My intention is survival." A chilling silence followed. Then, without warning, the Vanguard's engines hummed, soft at first, then growing into a deep powerful vibration that shook the entire Imperial blockade. But engines were offline, a technician whispered. "How?" The commander stared at the Terran ship with dread. "Terran technology does not follow our rules." The massive warship began rotating again, slow, precise, controlled. It aligned with the path it had shown earlier. Its destination, the Imperial capital. "Stop it," officers shouted. "Block its path. Fire anything." But nothing worked. Their weapons were still dead. Their engines refused to move. Their shields remained offline. The fleet was helpless. The Vanguard accelerated slightly. Just a small push. Even that small movement sent waves of fear across the Empire. "If that ship reaches the capital," an officer started. But the commander interrupted sharply, "We must not let it." The Terran's voice returned one last time. "You cannot stop me. Not today." Then, something impossible happened. A swirl of blue light formed around the Terran ship. Space itself bent. Not like a normal hyperspace jump. Not like any known warp drive. This was cleaner. Faster. Silent. Ancient Terran technology. Lost to time. The Vanguard glowed bright. And vanished. No flash. No sound. No trace. Only the fading heartbeat signal remained, echoing in the dark. The Empire stared at the empty space, knowing one terrifying truth. This was not the end. This was the beginning. The space where the Terran battleship vanished stayed quiet for a long moment. Too quiet. Imperial officers stared at the empty starfield as if the Vanguard might suddenly reappear. But it didn't. The Terran ship had truly disappeared, clean, perfect, silent, like a ghost folding into the dark. Inside Imperial Command, the silence broke slowly. Voices rose. Fear spread across every console. How did they move without a jump signature? What drive is that? No species can do that. Where is the ship going? Questions fell like rain, but no one had answers. The commander stood rigid, his hands gripping the edge of the command table. He had seen many battles, many threats. But this one was different. The Empire was not fighting a fleet. It was not facing an invasion. It was facing a single Terran. A Terran who moved like he already knew the Empire's weaknesses. The old historian officer walked closer to the commander. His face looked pale, as if he had aged 10 years in a single hour. "Sir, we must warn the capital. If the vanguard reaches the core system." The commander raised a trembling hand. "Communications." The calm officer checked the console. "Jammed, sir." "Not by us. Something left behind by the Terran ship. A field, or a signal. It's blocking all outgoing transmissions." A new wave of fear hit the room. That ship disabled our entire fleet, and jammed our own capital. How much power does it have? How did humans ever create something like that? The commander ordered full system reboots. Engines sparked. Shields flickered. Weapons hummed. But nothing returned to full power. The Vanguard's disabling pulse had sunk deep into their machines, like a virus written by someone who understood their technology better than they did. Or someone who had already studied it long before appearing. The commander whispered to himself, "This Terran did not run. He has a mission." At that moment, the sensor officer gasped again, loud enough to silence the room. "Sir," multiple signals appearing on long-range scans. The main screen shifted. Dots appeared across the star map. At first, they seemed random. But then they moved, slow lines forming a wide arc around Imperial space. "What are those?" an officer asked. The sensor officer zoomed in. "Debris?" "No, wait, they are fragments." "Fragments of what?" the commander demanded. The answer made the room cold. "Fragments of other Terran ships." Gasps filled the room. Across space, scattered like bones, lay broken pieces of Terran vessels, destroyed long ago in some unknown war. The old historian spoke softly, almost a whisper. "The Great Collapse, the old battles, this must be what remains of the Terran fleets." The commander felt the weight of history pressing down. If the Vanguard survived, maybe others did too. A cold possibility spread through the officers. What if Terrans had been out there, alive, rebuilding, watching the galaxy? Before dread could settle deeper, a sharp alarm echoed. Signal detected. The officers turned instantly. A message attempted to break through the communication block, weak, cracking, like it was fighting the Terran interference. "It's from the capital," the calm officer said. "Put it on," the commander ordered. Static filled the screen. Then a blurry image appeared, Imperial Council chambers. Officers running. Guards shouting. The room shaking. Then a voice came through, broken but clear enough to freeze every heart. "This is the Imperial Corps. We are under attack. Something is." The transmission cut sharply. The screen went dark. Everyone stared, breathless. The commander's voice trembled for the first time. "The Terran has reached the capital." But the sensor officer shook her head. "No, sir. This signal is not from the Terran battleship. It's something else." "What?" the commander demanded. She zoomed further into the data. Her face turned pale. Her eyes widened. "It's not one Terran ship." The room leaned forward. "It's not a fleet either." "What is it then?" the commander asked. The officer whispered the answer. "It's a storm." Confusion followed. "A storm? She nodded. A distortion storm. Space is breaking near the capital. Something huge is coming through. It's not the Terran ship. It's something else entirely. The old historian felt ice run through his veins. The Terran said. You stand in the path of something greater. The commander finally understood. The Terran ship wasn't the threat. The Terran ship was running from the threat. And the Empire was directly in its path. The commander whispered, What could make a Terran battleship flee? No one answered. Because none of them wanted to imagine something more frightening than a Terran. The command room felt colder than space itself. Officers whispered in fear as the last broken message from the capital replayed in their minds. They had expected the Terran battleship to be the threat. They had expected war. They had expected destruction. But they had not expected this. The Terran ship ran. The capital screamed. Space itself began to tear. And no one understood why. The commander forced himself to speak. Sensor officer. Describe the storm. Her hands shook, but she obeyed. She pulled the star map closer, zooming toward the capital system. The image distorted and glitched like the storm was interfering even with distant sensors. Sir, the distortion is expanding. Space is bending inward, like something heavy is pushing through. Not a ship. Not a fleet. Something much bigger. The old historian whispered to himself, something that can break space, without engines, without technology. Something not meant for this galaxy. Officers looked at him in confusion and fear. The commander leaned closer to the screen. His voice softened. What did Terrans face out there, that forced them into hiding? No one could answer. Then, just as panic threatened to take control, the comm systems crackled again. A new message forced its way through the Terran jamming field. Weak. Broken. But real. All units evacuate, capital is collapsing, distortion expanding. The transmission ended. The commander felt his chest tighten. The Empire was falling apart. And all because of something they had never seen, something the Terran was running from. The old historian spoke again, his eyes dark with memory. Terrans used to speak of an enemy that was never recorded. They wrote warnings in old ruins. Shadows that hunted Terran ships. Beings that lived inside broken space. The commander turned sharply. Stories. Nothing more. The old man shook his head. Stories become stories for a reason, Commander. Something happened to the Terrans. Something wiped out their fleets. Something left that man alone in the dark. A sudden alarm cut through the room. The sensor officer shouted, Sir. A new signal. Something dropping out of the distortion. Everyone leaned toward the main screen. At first, only darkness appeared. A swirling void. Then a shape. No, not a shape. Many shapes. Twisted, long, moving like shadows crawling out of a nightmare. They were not ships. They were not creatures. They were something in between, alive, but shaped like starships built from living matter. The distortion cracked again, revealing more forms behind them, drifting like a swarm. The room filled with gasps. Are those alive? How do we fight something like that? What are they? No one knew. The swarm moved toward the capital, swallowing light itself as it advanced. The commander's voice broke slightly. Get us a clear picture. The image sharpened for a moment, just long enough for the officers to see what hunted the vanguard. The creatures' bodies were covered in jagged cracks of blue energy. Their wings were shaped like broken metal and bone. Their eyes, if they were eyes, glowed white like dying stars. They drifted, twisted, searching. Searching for something. Searching for the Terran ship. The command room froze with one horrifying realization. The Terran was not a threat. He was bait. Or prey. The creatures were the real danger. Then the sensor officer gasped, pointing at the screen. "Commander, one of them just changed direction." Everyone stared. One creature, bigger than the others, had turned away from the capital system. Slowly. Purposefully. It was looking at the Imperial fleet. At the ships the Terran had disabled. At the helpless armada surrounding empty space. At them. The commander felt his breath stop. "It sees us." The swarm leader moved closer. Space bent around it like soft cloth. Its energy cracked louder. Its glow sharpened. It was coming. For them. The commander opened his mouth to order a retreat, but before he could speak, a voice echoed through the room. The Terran's voice. Not a message. Not a recording. A live transmission. "You must listen. If you want to live, do not fire. Do not move. Do not even try to run." The commander froze, shock overwhelming fear. "Terran. Where are you?" The voice answered coldly. "I am already where you fear the most." The officers looked at the map. The Terran battleship had already reached the capital. It was facing the swarm alone. The Vanguard's beacon flared to life, bright, sharp, pulsing through the entire quadrant like a dying sun. The Terran spoke again. "I woke the others. But they are weak. I cannot fight this alone. You must trust me." The commander's voice trembled. "What is that storm? What are those creatures?" The Terran answered with a single chilling line. "They are the reason Terrans vanished." The swarm leader accelerated. The command room screamed in panic. But the Terran spoke calmly, like a man who had already accepted death. "If you fire, they will destroy all of you." The commander clenched his jaw. The entire fate of the Empire rested on trusting a Terran. A Terran who might be their only hope. Or their final mistake.